See my slides that say Flint and Harker and introduction. Great. I'm getting yeses. Wonderful. Okay, let's get going. So what we're going to cover, what Flint is and is not, outlook for the next school year, practical how-to, and some preliminary best practices that we've been working on with the pilot. I think Jennifer, has really covered sort of philosophically where we are well in our faculty meetings, but this is designed to be a little more introduction hands-on, if you will. So what it is and is not, the first two italicized points there are about artificial intelligence in general. I didn't want to come into this assuming that anybody knows anything. So we're kind of starting at baseline in that respect, but those are two definitions or descriptors, if you will. What Flint does is it uses OpenAI, which is the same technology that ChatGPT uses, with additional layers of student privacy guardrails. So the reason that one of the reasons we chose Flint was because it is really focused on education and specifically student learning. There are great programs that exist, and I'll talk about those in a second, for teacher efficiencies, which are also really useful. But Flint is for student learning foremost versus say Magic School AI, which is a great one that a lot of teachers use. If you haven't had a chance to look at or go to magicschool.ai, it's a really fun website to get lost in. But also it is a bit of a rabbit hole. So, use it full well knowing and setting lots of boundaries for yourself on time available when you're going into that particular website. Oops, sorry. So for the 24-25, we have a continued pilot with Flint. We will continue to have an eye on legal and ethical issues and emerging competitors. We are not saying we're not going to use anything else from an AI perspective. We're still learning just as much as everybody else is. So, and how AI functions within schools and within education has some distinct differences. And we want to make sure that we're being not beyond the bleeding edge, so to speak, but staying just shy of that and making sure that we are making pedagogically sound and thoughtful choices. And then continuing having an openness to creative and thoughtful use cases. So we're going to jump right in to the practical how-to. The URL, you don't need to go to this right now. I tend to be the kind of person as an audience member that likes to follow along as a presenter is doing something. And if you are one of those people, I appreciate it. I understand the inclination, but I want you to watch first, and then try. So the URL is harker.flintk12.com, and you log in with Google. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen again, but I'm going to share my Flint screen. So now you should see a login page that just says Flint, right? The URL says something different, but that's where it redirects to. It's a very clean, very simple. Sign in with Google. You choose your Harker Google account. You should all be loaded in there. Easy peasy. If you run into any login issues at any point, you can always reach out to me. What I see here is everybody's everything, all students, all teachers. So you will not see the same thing as I see, especially if you haven't used it yet. If you haven't used it, all of this down here under all sessions and all of this will be empty. You won't see any of that. The tutorial kind of how-to that the first time you log in is useful to go through. But it is a little repetitive from what I'm going to go over with you now. And Sohan, who is the CEO, the founder that we've been working with closely, every update, he provides additional information. So there was an update he sent us yesterday about some additional math related pieces in Flint that are more and more helpful. So on this right hand side, there are essentially two different parts to Flint. One is this friendly AI, which is, if you've used ChatGPT, it's very much like ChatGPT in how you deal with it, what you do with it. If you haven't, then great. This is essentially a chat. So what do you want to chat about today? If I want to chat about, help me understand the principles of design thinking, and I enter that, then it's going to talk to me and we're going to chat about things. So that's essentially what this does. It saves it. It's going to give me all of this information. One thing that Flint does is that because it was created for education, it doesn't just provide you with the information that you want to chat about, it will ask probing questions. So it doesn't just dump the information and then walk away, so to speak. It will dump the information and then it will say, what are some ways you could apply these phrases or these phases to come up with a creative solution? So it does prompt a little bit. While this is, I think this is interesting and there's some capability to this, this is not the thing that I'm super excited about or that I'm, oh, well, this is different. This is interesting. What I'm more interested in and what most of the teachers largely use is this thing called tutors. So they've gone through multiple iterations of what to call this. And it's just literally the naming of it that has been a bit of a challenge, I guess. They started by calling it assignment, which kind of made sense. And then they changed it from assignment to tutor, where you're creating a tutor, because they found a lot of students using it kind of in that way. I think if you want to get away from the assignment and sort of grade focus on it, going the direction of tutor is not fantastic. I would rather they just call it activity. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So what you do in this section as a teacher, what I'm going to is the following. I'm going to go through and I'm going to create a dummy assignment or activity tutor. And when I create this assignment, it's going to take me through various steps. I am then going to go back to the different elements of that assignment and show you what you can change as a teacher, show you what it looks like once students have submitted items, and we'll go from there. So this is one part where I would love somebody's input, because I've been doing a lot of these and I've done a lot of these. So if somebody could unmute themselves and give me an assignment, you'll see here they have some ones that are prompted: have students order food from a restaurant in French, debate climate change. Does somebody have an activity or an assignment, a one sentence? I would like students to be able to. Don't everybody talk at once. You're like, I don't want students to do anything right now. Nothing.
I'll take one.
Cool.
Can we compare the macro economies of France and Germany?
Macro. Great. So then the first thing that I do as a teacher is I select my grade level. I can choose which system of grade level I want to choose, and we're going to go straight 12th grade. Okay. And if I had a document that was sort of a source document that I wanted that to be part of their knowledge base or something that could be referenced, that'd be great. If I had a YouTube video or something else, there's some coding in this, and it absolutely can be used for coding and CS, also math and scientific equations, but we're going with this one right now. So I create the activity or tutor, if you will. So over here on the left-hand side, these are these different elements I was telling you about. This second part, what it's doing right now is it's creating essentially 3 different options or ways of achieving this student objective. And what I've found is that mostly it's kind of in order of easiest to hardest, or lower level thinking skills to higher level thinking skills. But you'll see that the choices that it provides are an interactive chat-based tutoring session where the student can engage in a dialogue. You can edit this. If you don't like it saying tutoring, then you can call it a chat-based activity where the student can engage in a dialogue to compare and contrast. They will learn about GDP, unemployment rates, fiscal policies, and more through tailored responses. So this is for your information, right? This is not something that gets delivered to the students. This is it talking to you. This second one is a chat-based assignment that will guide through a discussion on the differing economic policies
tonight.
between them. And then the third one is the students will analyze key economic indicators such as inflation rates and trade balances. So you can tell, even if you know nothing about macroeconomics, like me, sorry, Patrick, but even if you know nothing, you can kind of tell that the first one seems simplest, the second one seems like a little more sophisticated, and the third one seems like most sophisticated in terms of what you might want the students to be doing. So we're going to choose the second one just for giggles. And then I choose next, and then I don't do anything for a second because it's creating a whole bunch of other things that we will go back to in a second, like I said. But you see over on the left-hand side, it highlights in blue what it's working on for each of those. So now it's given us this preview. This is what the students will see. Welcome to our discussion on the economic policies of France and Germany. To start, could you share what you know about the economic strategies in these 2 countries have adopted in recent years? Great. So I'm going to come back to this original objectives. So similar to how we've talked, or you may have heard people talking about prompt writing being something that's really important in learning how to interact with artificial intelligence. The equivalent here is writing a good objective. This is your prompt, right? This is that thing you want students to be able to do. So if you find that you are not getting the kinds of assignments that you would want, you need to go back to your objectives. And if you click here on this how to write tutoring objectives, it's going to give you some really excellent prompts. I don't mean the actual prompts, but like some really good ideas and samples for what to do instead. Similarly, if you didn't like any of the 3 options that it was that it provided you, you can click regenerate and it'll give you 3 different options. So you can continue that process where you're like, nah, let me tweak this to make sure that I am aligning this appropriately and how I want to. Similarly, you can also lower the reading level or raise it, or you can tell it to do essentially anything. Give me a more specific objective, and it will offer you some suggestions. So this tutor type here, you've got the 1, 2, 3. If you want to change it at any point, it will then go back and regenerate everything else because this really feeds the rest of it. This language part, so the primary language is set to English, but our language teachers might find it of interest that they now have this language element of selecting which other languages the AI and the student are allowed to use. So if you want the debate or the discussion to take place in a particular other language, you can choose that. You could choose that as the primary language. You could choose the other language as the primary language and English as the secondary in case the student kind of stumbles and they're struggling and they want to use English. So this one was like, well, we're talking about France and Germany. So if you've got somebody who wants to address this in German, then go for it. The input and the output methods, I find this really useful across the grade levels. The lower grade teachers find it most interesting, but as a previous high school teacher myself, I absolutely would have used this. because the input method allows you to choose writing, speaking, or writing or speaking. So if you've got students who perhaps are more articulate verbally than they are in the written word, and that is not something that you are necessarily caring about right now for this assignment, great. Give them a chance to actually articulate it. It will transcribe it so that you can still read it. You don't have to listen to it, but it will do that. Similarly, in the output method, also really nice, this allows reading and listening with or without autoplay. So if I'm the kind of person that I love audiobooks, but I also like to read at the same time. I want all of the inputs simultaneously. And so this, a student could choose to listen to it while they're reading it and go, okay, I think I get it. It gives you the inflection. It gives some other additional information that can be useful. Tutor behavior, you can change the tutor role or name the role. So if you don't want it to be economic policies discussion, you can call it something else. If you want it to be more or less helpful. So full help is going to give you it, the AI is then going to provide a bunch of answers. Medium tends to be pretty good because it's going to prompt and prompt and prompt, but it's not going to very easily provide the answer that the student is looking for. And I will tell you, like, I was looking at this before the AP language test the other day, and there were students who were asking it for, like, give me a good thesis, for here's my information, give me a good thesis. And the Flint chat was really pushing back and like, what do you mean you want a good thesis? Like, tell me more. Like, it looks like this is what you've done well. Do you need help on something more specific? So it was very, I appreciated at least that part of it. The initial prompt, if you want to edit any parts of that, and then the rules. The rules can be really useful because this is where you as the teacher, you're going to drive what, how you want your students to interact, and vice versa, how the AI is going to interact back with you. And then you can allow, so the grading, you can turn off auto grading, you can turn off the grading rubric. Like, this is not a necessity to this entire part. But if you want to give process-based feedback, so approaching or, add expectations, exceeding expectations, you want to add your own grades in here. It pre-slugs it with A through F. You can take those out. You can take some of them out. You can have the students only be able to achieve a C, D, or F and see what that feels like for once in their lives. Like, you can, not as a punishment, but, just dip your toe into it in an environment that is not going to hurt them. So all of these are options you can change. And then the assignment. So if you have students do this in class, you can pause the tutor so they can't work on it at home. They can only work on it in class with you to kind of help facilitate and manage it. You can also set a duration of time that they are allowed to spend on it. There's an outer limit. There is not a minimum. And there's also deadline options. I find the duration to be, regardless of what you set up here or not, it will always give you the amount of time that the student did actually spend on it. And I find that to be really helpful and useful because sometimes we believe that something should only take 15 minutes or it only takes half an hour, when in reality, it may have taken the student 45 minutes or an hour. And that load that students often talk about, we might be able to get like actual data of how much time they're spending on a particular assignment. And this is just one way to do that. Karen, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So the first question I have was around the feedback that you can give the students. Can you customize that level for every student? Like, the student don't give so much feedback, or the helpful part.
So
none, medium, and
No, but when I get through more of the demo, you're gonna see more of the kind of information that you get for each individual student as well as for the whole class. So it's a little preemptive, that question, because there's other kind of information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the second question I have, could you say what you said about the duration again, please? You said something about an outer limit and I didn't catch everything.
Yeah, so of course, there you can have an outer limit. So you know, no more than 60 minutes, but you can't have a minimum. So you can't say students must spend at least 10 minutes on this. Okay. So once you have this completed, or as well as you want to, the other thing that you can do is you start right here, and you as the teacher, this is just you would type a message here, type the response here. What do you know about the economic strategies these two countries have adopted in recent years? I know nothing. Okay, we're going to go with the Liz answer, probably not the answer that your students are going to give. But it is very helpful. It's very positive, which I think that's great. Like I want my kids to be encouraged. Let's start by exploring some basic concepts. So it gives some basic information, and then could you think of how these differences might affect the way countries respond to economic challenges? So it kind of takes it a little broader so that the kids are thinking about general concepts that they may know before they start to drill down into global recessions are very bad. Okay, so it wants me to know this. I am, showing my ignorance. Absolutely. He's like, yup. So it is providing. So it's really like, honestly, I find it to be really helpful with people who feel like what they're asking in class might not be socially acceptable. And what I mean by socially acceptable, I'm talking about the kids who don't want to ask a question because they're afraid of what their peers might think. So the ability for them to ask a question and be this dense, I know nothing, and global recessions are really bad. Can you imagine in your class if a student actually said that? Now you may create an environment that is really supportive, and the kids are they're not gonna say anything maybe, but you better believe after class or snicker on the side, because this is developmentally where they are. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, did you hear like global recessions are bad, or they're just really bad? Like, so this provides some of that individualized feedback without the social intimidation, right? And for me, I'm like, okay. All right. So let's say you've gone through this and you've done both sides of it, the I know nothing to the more sophisticated scene where it's prompted. You click create, and it really is very simple. You can give this link directly to your students, and they will log in with Google and go directly to this particular prompt. You can create groups, and I'll show you that in a moment. So if you create a group, the group has all of your students in it. You can manually add them, or just have the students just create one of these assignments, give them the link, and make sure that the group chosen is the group that you've created for your class. Are you with me? Does that make sense? Okay. You can also share this with other teachers. So if you've created an assignment and there's somebody else who you think might benefit, or you want a thought partner on its development, then there are a couple history teachers who've done that here at the middle school, who have collaborated on some assignments. and they are both owners. You can have multiple owners, not a problem. So, okay, I'm a teacher, I've created this, great. Now, what's going to happen as a teacher is this is going to come up in the center. And where I said you create groups is over here on the left-hand side. It's as simple as creating a group. You name it whatever you'd like to name it. You can add a logo or not. You can create a tutor if you want. If you want a tutor who, for instance, is an expert in AP statistics, you could create a tutor, and that is the personality that they have. The default is that friendly AI that's sort of a generalist, if you will. So you can choose whether the default tutor is specific to your content area, or you create the general, you have the group, have the general generic tutor, and each assignment gets its own specialized tutor. So for the example that we had before, if you wanted, for instance, that assignment to be facilitated by, I don't know, somebody who was an expert in macroeconomics, or somebody who was an expert in any of that. I see, this is where my ignorance is. I did something, you could give them multiple different personalities. So you create the group, and then the group exists. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show you an assignment that I was using before this one. So this is a health class. I'm going to show you the bully behavior exploration. And this is 7th grade, I believe. But this over here is that description. The student will explore various scenarios and behaviors that typify bullying, and then the tutor will guide the student through various bullying situations, helping them understand the dynamics that contribute. Okay. So this is what each of the students received when they first started it. And then this is, again, that teacher view. So you've created that assignment, you've assigned it to the kids have done the assignment, you come to the assignment, and then you will see all of the students' submissions here along the left-hand side. Auto grading was turned on, so all of them are there. Again, that's based on the rubric that you set up. So this A, B, whatever, you don't have to have it viewable by the students. You don't even have to view it, doesn't matter. But let's say I click here on one of them. A couple things are going to happen, are going to be noticeable. One, student spent 6 minutes, 3 seconds on it. So this is where it goes back to what I was saying before, where you can see how long a student spent on a particular assignment. Now, based on my own going through many of these assignments in this particular example, almost all of them were like 6 minutes. So clearly, chances are this was an assignment that was done in class quickly, maybe as a warm-up, maybe as a exit ticket, something very tightly controlled and immediate, right? Like just quick, but individualized, because every student was working on it and having those interactions. So back to your question earlier, Karen, about the helpfulness and changing the helpfulness. Even if you keep it at medium, it changes based on each individual's responses. So it's going to, you saw like when I was writing, it was like, okay, you clearly need a little more help. So I'm going to ask you some more prompting questions, where somebody who's going to pick it up really quickly, it's going to ask higher level, more sophisticated questions. The two really kind of fun things about this is that once I click on their assignment submission, which is called a session, these session analytics show up on the right-hand side, and it will give me strengths, areas of improvement, and follow-up. And the follow-up also allows me to create a follow-up tutor that is just for that student. So if a student completely bombs a particular area, then you can create that follow-up tutor based on the AI's suggestion of a next goal. You can edit it just like you did with the original assignment. And then you're starting to personalize some of the holes that might exist for each of these kids. The other thing I want to point out in this original, in the individualized part, is that if I click on any one of these, now this was just 6 minutes, so it's actually pretty easy to kind of look through and identify individual, like what the student has said. But let's say it was much longer of a discussion. If I click on any of these parts that look like they're hyperlinked, they kind of are, because where it says you demonstrate a good understanding of the factors that contribute to bullying, such as anger and retaliation. If I click on that, that's a generalization, right? I want to know where it thinks that is pulled from. And it takes me directly to the part that the student said, maybe they got angry and want to retaliate. So things that we as teachers might be critical of in terms of how the AI is generalizing and making these judgments about strengths is directly linked to the textual evidence of what the student said. So usually there's some stuff in areas of improvement as well, but you can see that pulls those information. Karen, what? Do you have a question?
Yes, sorry. So this only the teacher can see, the student cannot see areas of strength, improvement, and follow up yet.
I believe that there might be something. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, because I know there have been updates and changes, and my gut says there's something in the settings, but my memory is forgetting where that is, if it exists. So I want to.
Cool, either way, even if the student gets to see this and it's valid feedback, that's great. I mean, it's like you get this right away. So
Yeah. No, but it's a great, I can't believe I've had so many of these sessions and nobody's asked that yet, honestly. Like, so when I taught high school English and I would read all of these essays, one of the things that I tried to do is that the next day I would come back to class, or not, when I was done reading all the essays, I would come back to class and I wanted to give feedback to the students holistically before I handed back the individual feedback. And sometimes that would be like, here's what I saw you did really well as a whole. Here are the places that I feel like we need more reinforcement, whole group. So the way I would determine that is because based on reading all of those essays, I would be taking notes, right? Like, because I would notice patterns and my mind was constantly like churning through, wow, like they really don't know how to do in-text citations, or wow, they really are struggling with transitions. And so I would be taking notes of these things. I would write the individualized feedback, but then the things that I felt like I, as a teacher, need to go back and I need to do a better job of this, and find a different way to present this information because it's not sinking in. Here, the tutor analytics gives you those same strengths, areas of improvement, and follow-up whole class. So it does that same thing that I used to do with my stack of essays. And if I click on any one of these links, like I did for the individual one, it will give me specific quotes from multiple kids that address that element. So this takes it a step further than I usually would. Like I would talk in these generalities to the kids. And sometimes if I had the bandwidth or the time or the energy, I would pull out kids samples and I'd say, okay, this kid, I want you to read this. What makes this really good, a great transition? What makes this a great in-text citation? How could we improve this this particular in-text citation? But this pulls it directly. So I don't have to do that as much. Now, is it perfect? Is it always going to be right about what the strengths are as a whole or the, no, but I'll tell you what, it's going to do it a heck of a lot faster than, and that's going to allow me the time to think about if this really is an area for improvement. So students could benefit from delving deeper into how media, community norms, and national policies shape bullying behaviors. Okay, great. Now I can spend my energy and my time creating a really great lesson around that. Having a being fairly assured that that is something they need to know. And even if AI didn't tell me, I could probably say like, that's what they need to know. But then it also gives me, if I want to do a whole group follow-up tutor, I could do that here. So I'm not saying that this is the be all and end all and it's the answer to all, but I think from a student learning perspective and a use for AI that can save you time. And again, for me, that value of really removing the social stigma of being wrong helps a lot. So I'm going to go back to my slides real quick here. Okay. So the URL, you log in with Google. We're still looking for solutions for our TK through 2. It's heartbreaking because I've got a couple teachers in TK through 2 who have these phenomenal ideas for how to use it with their kids using the speaking and but because they don't have strong keyboarding skills and because we don't give our K through 2 kids passwords yet, like they have an account, but they don't have access to their password because you can imagine where that password would end up. We're still working with Flint on something that might be viable for the youngest kiddos. There are these 2 parts. Remember, there's like the chat / friendly AI, and there's the tutor assignment activity. Whatever you want to call that. So in the pilot group, where we are right now, we are working on kind of preliminary best practices and skills, skills that would be valuable for us as teachers to have, and as well for students to start to learn, whether it's prompt building or questioning. One of the elements of this, they're the unintended consequences, if I may say, that I have found from just having to be immersed in it this year is I have gotten more practice in models of good questions by just interacting on it. Not only are my prompt skills improving, which is great, that's kind of expected, it should, you do something over and over again, but the fact that when I'm engaged in a conversation or back and forth with whatever, ChatGPT or, Flint, because it's prompting me all the time and it's asking me questions all the time, I have found myself having conversations and referencing in my mind, at least, questions that I've been asked in AI to kind of like, and it's not like it's in your brain kind of thing. I'm not like conspiracy theorist on that respect, but it's giving me a model for questions that I think in general, unless you are a naturally curious person or you have models for good questioners in your life, we don't have enough of, right? Everybody speaks, everybody listens, not everybody, sorry. Many people listen in order to be able to speak again. They don't listen fully and presently to what is actually being said. They're waiting to be able to have their opportunity to respond because we're processing in our minds while somebody else is speaking. But if a kid doesn't have processing what I should say and they're just reading what's being asked of them, they're going to get more from it in some respects. Now, do they have a relationship with it? No. Is that the key to you and your students? Absolutely. So we are discussing these best practices and what that looks like in the future with teachers, students. And there's definitely a focus on teacher choice and options about how, when, where, why, under what conditions would this make most sense. And we also want to be able to provide some clear tips for success in its use. So, and over again in all of our pilot discussions, it's this idea we keep coming back to, which may seem logical and almost pedantic, but it's still important to choose AI usage that aligns with specific learning objectives, not using it for the sake of using it. Like we've always kind of said, like the conditions under which it makes most sense. So the second workshop that I'm offering in June, that is just a repeat of this one. So don't feel compelled to come to both of them unless you really want to hear the whole spiel again, or you watch it, you're like, cool, yes, I want to go do this. And then life happens and you forget. And then you walk away going, oh, maybe I need a reminder. If you want a deep dive, summer grants are due. I know it's kind of late, but due tomorrow, or you can reach out to any of your lid directors. What's the link again? There you go. Anything else? There will be a link to the LibGuide. I'm going to share this. I'm here all summer. And that's pretty much it. Do you guys, are there any other questions that are hanging out there before we close out? I mean, we have 2 whole minutes. That's like 120 seconds worth of time that we could use. I see something in the chat. Okay. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Well, with that, thank you guys very much for your time and effort and energy and everything. And I so appreciate you guys taking the time at the end of this day. Patrick, thank you for being my co-host. Karen, thanks for the great questions. Have a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.